She was just a nurse on a billionaire's jet until the contract turned into a love she couldn't escape. Welcome to Billionaire Stories Real. If you enjoy deeply emotional stories of redemption and true love, please subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let us dive into the untold story that changed everything. Marry me. 30 days. No love, just a contract. Let us go back to the main character. The rain streaked against the cabin windows of the Vale private jet, each drop gliding down the glass like a secret waiting to fall. Inside, the air felt too quiet, too expensive, too wrong for a nurse who had just finished a 30-hour hospital shift. Elena Moore stood near the aisle, her scrubs still faintly smelling of antiseptic, her badge tucked into her coat pocket, as if hiding proof of where she really belonged. Across from her sat Nicholas Vale, the billionaire who owned the sky tonight. His hand rested on a stack of documents bound in black leather. His voice was low, deliberate, every syllable heavy with control. This is not about love, Elena. It is about protection. For both of us. Elena's heart pounded. She had been called to this flight believing it was for a medical emergency, but the man before her did not need saving. He needed cover someone who could make the world believe he had already moved on from his late wife before the media could devour him alive. He slid the folder across the table. A temporary arrangement. 30 days. You play my wife while I handle this acquisition tour. You will be compensated well, and when it is over, your life goes back to normal. She blinked, disbelief tightening her throat. You cannot be serious. Nicholas leaned back, watching her reaction like a stock graph he already knew how to read. You need money. I need silence. We both get what we want. Her eyes dropped to the folder. Inside, neat lines of type spelled out her entire future in cold. Legal terms, payment, confidentiality, and the clause that froze her blood. No emotional involvement. Elena thought of her brother's hospital bill waiting in her inbox. The number glared at her every night like a countdown. She had begged the hospital board for an extension, but compassion was never free. Why me? She whispered. Nicholas's gaze softened, just slightly. Because you are the only one who did not try to sell my story. For a moment, the hum of the jet engines filled the silence between them. The world outside blurred into silver light. Elena could feel her pulse in her fingertips as she reached for the pen lying beside the folder. It gleamed under the cabin light's sterling silver, engraved with his initials NV. He noticed her hesitation. You are free to walk out, but if you do, I will find another nurse tomorrow. Someone less honest. That word honest stung like a test she could not afford to fail. Her hand trembled as she signed her name. The pen scratched against the paper, sealing a deal she barely understood. When she finally looked up, Nicholas had already slipped the contract into his briefcase. From this moment, he said quietly, you are Mrs. Vale. The engines roared louder as the jet lifted through the storm, carrying them both above the clouds, two strangers bound by ink, lies, and something far more dangerous than either dared to name. And for the first time in her life, Elena Moore realized that saving someone could mean losing herself entirely. The next morning began before the sun. The jet had landed hours ago, but Elena had not slept. Her signature still echoed in her head like a bell that would not stop ringing. The folder was gone, locked away in Nicholas Vale's briefcase, but the weight of that decision sat heavy in her chest. When she opened the cabin door, a burst of coastal air hit her. They were on a private runway near Palm Beach. The sky was pale blue, the kind of color that promised heat later, and the smell of jet fuel mixed with salt from the ocean. She followed Nicholas through a quiet corridor toward a waiting car. The driver bowed slightly. Good morning, Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale. The sound of that title made her heart stumble. Nicholas did not correct him. He only nodded once, polished and unreadable. Inside the car, silence stretched between them. Elena's fingers twisted the strap of her bag. She wanted to ask him what happened next, where they were going, how she was supposed to pretend to be someone she was not, but his eyes stayed on the passing coastline. Finally, he spoke. The press already knows I am here. You will stay at the estate for a few weeks until the European trip begins. There are staff, but they think this marriage is real. You will act accordingly. Act accordingly, she repeated under her breath, as if the words were too large to fit in her mouth. Nicholas turned his head, his tone still composed. The First rule of this arrangement is credibility. You do not need to like me, Miss Mrs. Vale, but you do need to look at me the way a woman looks at her husband. She stared at him, offended and embarrassed at once. And how exactly is that? His lips curved faintly. With trust, even if it is borrowed. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When the gates of his estate appeared, a long stretch of white marble and glass overlooking the Atlantic, Elena's throat tightened. The property looked like something built for gods, not men. As the car stopped, staff lined up along the driveway. She caught her reflection in the tinted window, plain clothes, tired eyes, still the nurse who did not belong here. Nicholas stepped out first, straightening his tie. His voice shifted to a public warmth she had not heard before. "Everyone, this is my wife, Elena Vale." A ripple of polite greetings followed. Cameras clicked from somewhere near the gate. Elena forced a smile, feeling the strange burn of a life that was not hers. Inside, the house was all quiet elegance, white walls, glass staircases, and the faint scent of sandalwood. A woman in a tailored suit approached. "Mrs. Vale, I am Julia, your assistant. Mr. Vale requested that I help you get settled. Your wardrobe has already been arranged for the next events." "My wardrobe?" Elena blinked. "But I did not." Nicholas cut in smoothly. "You will find everything you need upstairs. Appearances matter." He turned to leave, pausing only once at the doorway. "Dinner at 7. There are photographers outside, so be ready to smile." When he was gone, Elena exhaled shakily. She walked upstairs and opened the closet. Dozens of gowns hung in perfect order, each one more expensive than her entire salary. A diamond bracelet rested in a velvet box. Beneath it, folded neatly, lay the nurse's uniform she had worn on the jet. Someone had pressed and returned it, a silent reminder of the world she came from. She sank onto the edge of the bed, rubbing her temples. The sound of the ocean drifted through the balcony doors. Somewhere downstairs, the staff moved like ghosts, loyal to the image of a marriage that did not exist. For a brief moment, she wondered what kind of man lived, surrounded by so much perfection and yet looked so lonely. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hospital appeared on the screen. "Payment for your brother's procedure received in full." Elena's breath caught. He had paid it, without telling her. The contract might have been cold, but the gesture was not. And in that quiet room of marble and light, she began to understand that nothing about Nicholas Vale was simple, least of all the line between kindness and control. Dinner that evening unfolded like a performance Elena had never rehearsed for. The dining hall stretched the length of a ballroom, its ceiling high enough to hold echoes. A table of dark oak gleamed beneath the light of 1,000 small candles. Everything about it felt distant, arranged, beautiful, and cold. Nicholas sat at the opposite end, posture straight, expression unreadable. Between them, the dishes looked like art exhibits. The air carried the faint hum of classical music and the soft clink of silverware. She lifted her fork only to realize her hands were shaking. "I am not sure I belong here," she said finally, her voice barely above the music. Nicholas looked up. "You are here because you agreed to be, and because you are capable of far more than you think." The words sounded kind, but his tone left no room for warmth. He returned to his meal, perfectly composed. Elena watched him for a moment, studying the man behind the flawless surface. There was something calculated about every move he made, every pause, every measured glance. "You paid for my brother's surgery," she said quietly. His eyes flickered up, a hint of surprise breaking through the calm. Was that not part of the deal? It was not written anywhere. He took a slow sip of wine. Some things are better left off paper. Elena felt her throat tighten. Gratitude battled with unease. She had entered his world because of need, not trust. Yet every time she thought she had understood the limits of his control, he crossed them in a way that felt almost considerate. The door opened softly. Julia, the assistant, entered carrying a slim silver tray. "Mr. and Mrs. Vale, the press briefing has been scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. Vogue wants an exclusive photograph of you two together for their charity issue." Elena froze. Nicholas, however, did not flinch. "Tell them we will be ready," he said. When Julia left, he met Elena's gaze. "You will need to learn how to stand beside me without looking terrified." She set her fork down. "I am a nurse, not a mannequin. I am aware. he said, almost amused. But for now, you are Mrs. Vale. Appearances keep. The vulture's away. You will thank me later. He rose, signaling that dinner was over. Elena followed him to the marble terrace overlooking the ocean. The night air was cooler than she expected. Stars spilled across the horizon like a curtain of light. For a moment, the world outside their contract felt almost real. Nicholas rested his hands on the railing. When the reporters ask, you will say, we met during my recovery. You were my nurse. You were my nurse. The relationship became personal, and we married quietly last month. Elena stared at him, speechless. You have this all planned. I have to. My family's foundation depends on public trust. If I appear unstable after the accident, the board will move to replace me. So I am your cure, she murmured, more to herself than to him. He turned, and the reflection of the stars lit faintly in his eyes. You are my proof that I am still human. The words caught her off guard. For a heartbeat, the space between them changed. The man who had handed her a contract now sounded like someone carrying a weight far heavier than money or pride. Elena looked away first. What happens when the 30 days are over? Nicholas smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Then we go back to being who we were before. She nodded, though her chest tightened at the thought. Behind them, the sea whispered against the rocks, steady and endless. That night, alone in the guest suite, Elena replayed his words over and over. She knew the rules, she knew the boundaries, but as she stared at the silver pen engraved with his initials lying on the nightstand, she wondered if anyone could truly spend 30 days living a lie without letting some part of it become true. The next few days unfolded like a movie Elena did not remember auditioning for. Every morning began with lessons in posture, etiquette, and public poise. Julia, calm and efficient, guided her through the rituals of high society, which fork to hold first. How to keep her chin at the right angle for cameras, how to smile without revealing nerves. Relax your shoulders, Mrs. Vale, Julia reminded gently. You look like you are waiting for an injection. Elena exhaled, forcing a smile. Maybe because I usually give them. The room filled with soft laughter from the makeup team. For a moment, she forgot she was pretending. But then Nicholas appeared in the doorway, and the air seemed to change. His presence was composed, sharp, the kind that made people straighten instinctively. He studied her outfit, a soft ivory gown that fell to her ankles, and nodded once. That will do, he said. Julia stepped back. Perfect timing, Mr. Vale. The car is ready for your interview with the foundation team. Nicholas looked at Elena. You will join me. Her stomach fluttered. I thought it was a private meeting. It is, he replied. But a married man should not appear alone. People draw conclusions, and I need those conclusions to be useful. The ride into the city was quiet except for the hum of the engine. Elena watched the sunlight flicker off the ocean through the tinted windows. Nicholas reviewed documents on his tablet, his focus absolute. She wondered if there was ever a time he allowed himself to simply breathe. When they arrived at the downtown office tower, photographers were already waiting. The flash of cameras painted bursts of white across the car windows. Nicholas turned to her before stepping out. Remember, Mrs. Vale, trust, even if it is borrowed. He opened her door and extended a hand. For the first time, she took it without hesitation. The cameras caught that moment, the way her eyes lifted to his, the way he looked at her as though she belonged there. It was only a performance, but the heat in her chest felt real. Inside, the meeting hall gleamed with glass and steel. Executives and donors filled the space, all eager to greet Nicholas Vale, the visionary who turned tragedy into triumph. Elena stood quietly at his side, smiling when spoken to, answering politely when asked about the marriage. The lies rolled off her tongue easier than she expected. During the break, she slipped out to the balcony overlooking the city. The wind lifted her hair, carrying the scent of coffee and asphalt. For a moment, she could breathe again. Nicholas joined her minutes later, 2 glasses of sparkling water in hand. You handled yourself well, he said, passing her one. I just followed your lead. That is precisely why it worked, he replied. You listen, you observe, and you do not chase the spotlight. She glanced at him, searching for sarcasm, but there was none. He actually meant it. You give too much credit to instinct, she said softly. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. Instinct is what kept me alive when the plane went down last year. Logic did not. The words startled her. She had read about his crash in the papers, but hearing it from him was different. His voice carried a quiet fracture, like a man who still heard the engines burning in his dreams. "I am sorry," she said. He gave a faint smile. "Do not be. That accident reminded me that power does not make you untouchable. Pain humbles everyone." For a while, they stood in silence, the city below them a blur of light and motion. When they returned inside, the cameras flashed again. Nicholas placed a guiding hand on her back, steering her gently toward the exit. To the world, it looked natural, even tender. To Elena, it felt like the first time he had touched her without calculation. That night, as she removed her earrings before bed, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back did not seem like a nurse anymore. She looked composed, radiant, and dangerously close to believing the story they had written. The line between duty and desire had started to blur, and she could feel it, even as she whispered to herself, "This is only 30 days. Remember that." The following evening, the mansion transformed into a stage. Every chandelier blazed with light, and the air smelled faintly of orchids and champagne. It was the first charity gala of the Vale Foundation since Nicholas had returned to public life. Every guest who mattered in the city was there, dressed in glitter and money. Elena stood by the grand staircase, her heart beating too fast. The dress she wore shimmered like starlight, a design Julia had chosen specifically for the cameras. She was supposed to play a role, smile for photographs, and keep the illusion alive. But the more she looked around, the less real any of it felt. Nicholas appeared beside her, straightening his cufflinks. "Ready?" "No," she admitted honestly. He offered his arm. "Then hold on to the act until it feels true." They descended the staircase together, the crowd turning as flashes erupted from every direction. The rhythm of the cameras was like thunder. Nicholas guided her through the guests, each smile perfectly measured, each handshake precise. To anyone watching, they were the image of elegance and devotion. Halfway through the evening, the speeches began. Nicholas took the stage, commanding attention without effort. "The Vale Foundation was built to protect the ones who save lives," he said, his voice steady and low. "Tonight, we honor the people who heal without ever being seen." As the audience applauded, Elena felt her throat tighten. He had never mentioned her name, but his words sounded like they were meant for her. After the speech, as servers refilled glasses, a man approached her near the balcony. His tuxedo gleamed under the chandeliers, his smile too smooth to trust. "Mrs. Vale, I must say, you are far lovelier in person than the magazines show." She forced a polite smile. "Thank you." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "A woman like you must find it difficult, living in someone else's shadow. Nicholas Vale is a powerful man. Surely he does not leave much room for your voice." Elena straightened, her pulse quickening. "I do not measure my worth in how loud I speak, only in whether I am honest when I do." The man blinked, caught off guard, before muttering something about the crowd and disappearing. Nicholas had seen it all from across the room. When he reached her, the hint of a smile tugged at his lips. "That line will be quoted in the papers tomorrow. I was just trying not to make a scene. You did better than that," he said quietly. "You made an impression." For a moment, the noise of the gala faded. The orchestra swelled and his gaze softened. Under the bright lights, the performance felt less like pretending. Later that night, as the final guests left, Nicholas found her again near the terrace. The moon hung low over the ocean, painting silver streaks on the water. "You handled tonight beautifully," he said. "Even my board is impressed. You have no idea how much chaos you have saved me." She smiled faintly. "I am glad I could help your empire survive another day." He tilted his head, almost amused. "Is that what you think this is about? What else could it be?" Nicholas stepped closer, his tone quiet but certain. "You assume I built this deal for control, but what I really needed was peace. And for the first time in a very long time, standing next to you, I almost have it." Elena felt something shift inside her. The storm that had surrounded him since the day they met seemed quiet, if only for a heartbeat. She wanted to answer, to say something honest, but words failed her. He looked down, eyes lingering on her trembling hand. "You are shaking again," he said gently. "Too many cameras," she whispered. "No, he said softly. Too much truth. They stood in silence, the distant music fading into the sound of waves. 4. The first time since signing that contract, she could not tell whether the part she was playing had become real or if the man standing before her had already crossed the line neither of them was supposed to touch. Rain fell that night, soft and steady against the windows of the Vale estate. The world outside glowed with the faint shimmer of streetlights, but inside the mansion, everything was quiet. Elena sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing the silver gown from the gala. She had not been able to bring herself to change. Every word Nicholas had said kept replaying in her mind. Standing next to you, I almost have peace. She whispered the words out loud, testing how they sounded in her own voice. They felt too gentle to belong to a man like him, too sincere to be part of an act. A knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, Nicholas stood there, his shirt collar loosened, his tie gone. It was the first time she had seen him look anything less than perfect. I did not mean to wake you, he said. His voice was softer than usual, almost tired. You did not. I could not sleep anyway. He hesitated, then stepped inside. The air between them shifted. The tension that had once come from distance now came from how near he stood. The doctor called, he said quietly. He said your brother's recovery is going well. Elena's eyes widened. You spoke to him? I wanted to be sure you did not sign this contract for nothing. Her heart thudded once, hard. You did not have to do that. I know, Nicholas replied, but I wanted to. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain deepened, steady and rhythmic. She noticed a faint tremor in his hand as he rubbed his temple. Are you all right? She asked. I am fine, just a headache. You should sit down. He opened his mouth to argue, but when she looked at him the way a nurse looks at a patient, he sighed and sat. She fetched a glass of water and placed it in his hand. You spend all your time saving everyone else, she said softly. Do you ever let anyone save you? He gave a quiet laugh, not from humor but disbelief. I do not think anyone ever has. The power flickered briefly, and the room dimmed to a warm glow from the bedside lamp. Elena stood near him, arms crossed. The smell of rain filled the space between them. You do not have to be the strongest person in every room, she said. Sometimes people follow you not because you are powerful, but because you are kind. Nicholas looked up at her, the walls he had built for years softening just enough for her to see the exhaustion behind them. You really believe that? I do, she said, because kindness is the one thing that never needs to be proven. He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on her face. No one talks to me like that. Maybe because they are afraid. And you are not. I was, she admitted, but not anymore. The rain outside grew louder, beating against the glass in a slow rhythm that matched her heartbeat. He reached for the silver pen on her nightstand, the same one she had used to sign their contract. He turned it over in his hand, studying the engraved initials. When this all began, I thought this pen was a symbol of control, he said. But now, it feels like a reminder of everything I cannot control. Elena met his gaze. Maybe that is not such a bad thing. He set the pen down and stood. For a moment, it seemed he wanted to say something more, but instead, he simply nodded. Get some rest, Mrs. Vale. When the door closed behind him, Elena sank back against the wall. Her pulse would not settle. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the lines between them had shifted. The contract had begun as a shield, but it was slowly turning into something neither of them could name without risking everything. Outside, thunder rolled across the coast. The storm carried through the night like a warning. The deepest secrets are about to change everything. Subscribe now to catch the dramatic twist that is coming in the next chapter. The storm did not end with the morning. Clouds still pressed low over the coastline, heavy and gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elena walked into the living room to find Julia whispering urgently into her phone. When Julia noticed her, she hung up quickly, her expression tight. What is going on? Elena asked. Julia hesitated. There is a problem. A story broke online this morning. Someone leaked a copy of the marriage contract. The words hit like ice water. What? Julia nodded. A business blog published it an hour ago. They are saying your marriage is fake. that you were paid to pose as Nicholas Vale's wife. Before Elena could respond, Nicholas entered, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp and cold. Shut it down. Pay them if you have to. I want. Every trace deleted. He ended the call and looked at her. The calm she had seen in him the night before was gone. I swear I did not, she began, but he raised a hand. I know it was not you. But the timing is deliberate. Someone inside the company is trying to take me down before the board meeting next week. Elena's pulse raced. What will happen now? The same thing that always happens, he said bitterly. They will believe what they want to believe. By noon, the estate was surrounded by reporters. Headlines screamed across every screen: the nurse, the billionaire, and the lie. Photographers camped outside the gates, shouting questions whenever a car passed. Nicholas called for security, but the damage had already spread. His board demanded explanations. His investors threatened to pull support, and the foundation's donors began to withdraw their names from the next event. When evening came, Nicholas stood by the window, the reflection of the storm flickering across his face. This is exactly what I tried to avoid, he said. This is why the contract existed. Elena stepped closer. You do not have to face it alone. He turned sharply. Yes, I do. This was my mistake, not yours. You should go before they drag you through the mud with me. I am not leaving you like this, she said firmly. His expression hardened. You signed a deal, Elena. It had an end date. That time has come. The words cut deeper than she expected. For the first time, he sounded like the man she had met on that jet, cold, distant, unreachable. Without another word, she turned away, her hands trembling. The flashes from the cameras outside lit the window like lightning. She took one last look at him, standing alone in the dim light, and whispered, You said I made you feel human. Do not prove yourself wrong. Then she walked out into the rain, the sound of the storm swallowing the silence he left behind. 3 days passed, and the storm finally cleared, but the damage was far from over. Every news outlet replayed the same headline. Every talk show dissected their so-called marriage. Elena stayed hidden in a small apartment near the city hospital where she once worked. She had packed light, just a few clothes, and the silver pen that now felt heavier than anything she owned. Her phone buzzed constantly, filled with missed calls and messages from numbers she did not recognize. She ignored them all, except the single message from Julia that appeared early one morning. You should watch the press conference today. Elena hesitated but turned on the television, the screen filled with the familiar face she had tried to forget. Nicholas stood behind a podium bearing the Vale Foundation emblem. The crowd of reporters flashed cameras and shouted questions. His expression was calm, but his voice carried something she had never heard before: vulnerability. I will make this simple, he said. The rumors are true. The marriage between myself and Elena Moore began as a contract. I designed it to protect my company, my board, and my image after the crash that nearly cost me my life. He paused, the cameras clicking like thunder. But what I did not expect was that the person hired to play my wife would teach me how to live again. The room fell silent. Nicholas continued, his voice steady. She did not deceive anyone. I did. I wrote the contract. I built the lie. She only gave it heart, and for that I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn back the dignity I took from her. Elena's breath caught. She felt tears sting her eyes as he went on. Effective immediately, I am stepping down from Vale Industries. All profits from my recent contracts will be transferred to the Vale Foundation for medical scholarships and nursing programs under her name. He looked straight into the cameras. Her name is Elena Moore. She deserves more than silence. She deserves to be seen. The broadcast ended in a storm of voices, but Elena did not move. For the first time since that night on the jet, she believed him completely. The man who once controlled everything had just given up his empire for the truth. Later that evening, there was a knock on her apartment door. When she opened it, Nicholas stood there, drenched from the rain that had started again. He held out the silver pen she had left behind. I think this belongs to you, he said softly. Elena looked at him, searching his face for the arrogance that once defined him. It was gone. All that remained was the man who had finally learned that control and love could never live in the same place. He took a slow breath. I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. I am asking you to believe that everything I said out there was real. Elena stepped closer, her voice trembling. Then show me. Not with promises, with actions. Nicholas nodded. That is exactly what I intend to do. And for the first time, there was no contract between them, only truth. A full year passed before Elena saw the Vale estate again. The ocean breeze still carried the same salt and jasmine scent, but everything else had changed. The reporters were gone, the crowds had faded, and the mansion no longer felt like a fortress of secrets. It had become the headquarters of the Vale Foundation for Nursing and Care, a place built from the ashes of scandal into something that truly mattered. Elena stepped out of the car and looked up at the newly engraved sign above the entrance, the Moore Wing. Her breath caught. It was her name, carved into stone, where the world could see it. Inside, volunteers moved through bright hallways filled with flowers and photographs of scholarship students. At the center of it all stood Nicholas Vale. He turned as if he had known she would come. Time had softened him. The edges of ambition had been replaced with something quieter humility. I was hoping you would see this in person, he said. You named the entire building after me? She asked, half laughing, half trembling. He smiled. I thought it was fitting. You gave it purpose. I only provided the walls. Elena looked around, touched by the warmth that replaced what once was emptiness. You actually did it. You turned it all into something good. I had help, he said. You were the reason I started to believe that love is not weakness. They walked together through the new wing. Nurses greeted her with gratitude, students waved from the study hall, and every step echoed with the sound of life being rebuilt. When they reached the rooftop terrace, Nicholas stopped near the railing where the sea stretched endlessly below. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was the same silver pen that had once sealed their contract, but now it had been transformed. Its barrel was engraved with two letters, V.M.I. Kept this, he said quietly. It began as a signature for a lie. I thought it should end as a promise for something real. Elena's eyes glistened. What are you asking me, Nicholas? He smiled faintly. No more contracts. No more pretending. Just vows. He opened his hand, revealing a simple ring resting beside the pen. The wind caught her hair as he said, Marry me not for 30 days, not for headlines, but for life. Tears welled in her eyes. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear. She took the ring, her voice steady. Yes. The sea roared below, the sound of waves rising like applause. That evening, as the sun set behind the estate, their silhouettes stood together on the balcony, no longer billionaire and nurse, but two people who had found redemption in truth. The world had once called it a scandal. Now it was simply love. Thank you for joining us for this cinematic adventure. If you want more untold stories of billionaire love and redemption, please subscribe and choose your next true heart journey on your screen now.